Hey everyone. If you're enjoying the horror vibes, make sure to watch all 5 stories. Each one gets creepier and more twisted than the last. And whether you loved it or didn't like something, drop your thoughts in the comments. I read everything, the good, the bad, and the terrifying. The Romanian Inheritance. My name is Victor, and I'm not someone who believes in old superstitions. But after what happened on my family's land in the Carpathian Mountains of Romania, I question everything I thought I knew about reality. This story might sound impossible, but I swear on my grandmother's grave that every word is true. The land has been in my family for 6 generations. My great-great-grandfather bought it from a local baron in 1847, shortly after the peasant revolt. The deed was written in blood-red ink, something I always thought was just a quirky historical detail. The property sits in a valley surrounded by dense forests, where the mist never fully clears and the wolves still howl at night. Growing up, my grandmother Anna would tell me stories about the land. She claimed it was built on an ancient burial ground, where Romanian shamans once practiced necromancy and bound spirits to protect their villages from invaders. She showed me old dolls hidden in the cellar, crude figures made of straw and cloth, with human hair sewn into their scalps and fingernails pressed into their wooden faces. "These are not toys, Victor," she would whisper, her voice trembling with something between fear and reverence. "They are vessels. Each one holds a soul that chooses to stay behind, to guard our family's land." I thought it was just folklore, stories to keep children from wandering too far into the woods. But when Anna died last year, I inherited not just the land, but also a leather journal filled with her handwriting. The entries detailed rituals, protection spells, and warnings about what would happen if the land ever fell into the wrong hands. The journal mentioned something called the Blood Compact, an agreement my ancestor had made with the local spirits. As long as our family protected the land and honored the dead buried beneath it, the spirits would protect us. But if we ever sold or abandoned the property, the consequences would be unforgivable. I didn't take it seriously until the letters started arriving. The first came on a Tuesday morning in October, delivered by a man in an expensive suit who claimed to represent a German mining corporation. The offer was astronomical, enough money to buy a mansion in Bucharest and never work again. They wanted to strip mine the valley for rare earth minerals, something about the unique geological composition of the area. I refused immediately. The land wasn't just property to me. It was home history, the resting place of my ancestors. But the man didn't seem surprised by my answer. Instead, he smiled, a cold, calculating expression that made my skin crawl. "Mr. Popescu," he said, using my surname like it tasted bitter in his mouth, "we always get what we want, one way or another." After he left, I called my sister Ioana in Bucharest. She'd been struggling with severe depression and paranoid schizophrenia since her divorce, often calling me in the middle of the night claiming that people were following her, that voices were telling her to hurt herself. The doctors had tried various medications, but nothing seemed to help for long. "You should take the money, Victor," she said, her voice flat and emotionless. "There's something wrong with that place. I can feel it even from here. The dead are restless." I thought it was just her condition talking. But over the next few weeks, strange things began happening. I would wake up to find the guardian dolls moved to different positions in the cellar. My livestock, 3 goats and a dozen chickens, began acting erratically, refusing to graze in certain areas of the property and huddling together as if hiding from something. Then came the night visitors. I first noticed them during a particularly violent thunderstorm in early November. Through my bedroom window, I could see figures moving at the edge of the forest, just beyond the reach of my porch light. They stood perfectly still in the pouring rain, watching the house. When lightning flashed, I could see there were at least 5 of them, all wearing dark clothing that seemed to absorb the light. I grabbed my hunting rifle and went outside, but by the time I reached the spot where they had been standing, there was nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing to indicate anyone had been there at all. But I could smell something strange in the air, a sweet, cloying scent like flowers left too long in a tomb. The psychological pressure began building immediately after that. I started receiving phone calls at all hours, Sometimes heavy breathing, sometimes whispered threats in German, sometimes just the sound of children crying. My mailbox was filled with dead birds, their necks twisted at impossible angles. Someone, or something, had arranged them in a perfect circle with their beaks pointing toward my house. I called the police, but they seemed strangely disinterested. The officer who came to take my report kept checking his watch and yawning as if my terror was boring him. He barely looked at the dead birds before suggesting they were probably just killed by a fox. "These old mountain properties can make a man's imagination run wild," he said with a patronizing smile. "Maybe you should consider that mining offer. City life might be better for your nerves." That's when I realized the corruption ran deeper than I'd thought. Somehow, the mining company had bought off local law enforcement. I was completely alone. Ioana's condition worsened dramatically during this time. She began calling me multiple times a day, her voice getting more frantic with each conversation. She claimed that dolls were appearing in her Bucharest apartment, the same crude, straw-filled figures from our grandmother's cellar. "They're telling me things, Victor," she whispered during one particularly disturbing call. "They know about the compact. They know what you're supposed to do." "What compact? What am I supposed to do?" "Feed them," she said, and then the line went dead. I tried calling her back, but her phone had been disconnected. When I contacted her landlord, he told me Ioana had disappeared 3 days earlier, leaving behind only a room full of handmade dolls and walls covered in symbols drawn in what looked like blood. The attacks escalated after that. I woke up one morning to find all my windows broken, glass scattered across the floors in patterns that looked almost like ritual circles. My goats were found dead, their bodies arranged in the same circular pattern as the birds, but this time with their eyes removed and placed in small piles around the perimeter. But the worst part was the voices. Every night I could hear people talking just outside my house, sometimes in Romanian, sometimes in German, sometimes in languages I didn't recognize. They seemed to be having conversations about me, discussing my fate as if I weren't there to hear them. The nocebo effect is a powerful thing. When you expect something terrible to happen, your body responds as if it's already happening. I began experiencing symptoms I couldn't explain. Chronic headaches, nausea, the feeling that insects were crawling under my skin. I barely slept, barely ate. The isolation and psychological pressure were breaking me down exactly as planned. That's when I decided to fight back using my grandmother's methods. I spent hours studying her journal, trying to decode the rituals and protection spells she'd documented. Most of it seemed like nonsense. Instructions to bury specific herbs at the property corners, to burn sage while reciting ancient Romanian incantations, to feed the guardian dolls with drops of my own blood. But I was desperate enough to try anything. The feeding ritual was the most disturbing. According to Anna's notes, the guardian dolls required life essence to maintain their power. A few drops of blood from the landowner, given freely and with respect, would strengthen the protective barrier around the property. I gathered all 12 dolls from the cellar and arranged them in a circle in my living room. Their button eyes seemed to track my movements, and I could swear I heard faint whispers coming from their stitched mouths. Using a kitchen knife, I pricked my finger and let a drop of blood fall onto each doll's forehead. The change was immediate and terrifying. The dolls began to move, not dramatically, but with subtle shifts in position, turning their heads slightly toward the windows, their arms repositioning as if they were preparing for battle. The whispers grew louder, and I realized they were speaking in unison, chanting something in an old Romanian that I couldn't fully understand. But I caught enough words to get the gist. Protect the keeper, punish the trespassers, honor the compact. That night, the screaming started. It began around midnight, human voices crying out in agony somewhere in the forest. At first I thought it might be the mining company's thugs trying to scare me with recordings, but the sounds were too raw, too authentic. These were real people experiencing real terror. The screaming continued for hours, sometimes moving closer to the house, sometimes fading into the distance. Through my windows I could see lights flickering between the trees, not flashlights, but a cold blue glow that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. By morning, the screaming had stopped, but when I went outside to investigate, I found something that still haunts my dreams. Scattered throughout the forest were personal belongings, Wallets, phones, pieces of torn clothing. All German identification, all belonging to men who looked like corporate types in their driver's license photos. But no bodies. Just belongings and a lingering smell of sulfur and decay. I should have been horrified, but instead, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. The guardian spirits had done their job. The trespassers had been dealt with. Over the following weeks, I received several panicked phone calls from the mining company. Their advance team had gone missing, they said. Did I know anything about it? Had I seen any unusual activity in the forest? I told them the truth, that I'd heard screaming in the woods but hadn't seen anyone. Technically, that wasn't a lie. The calls stopped after that, and I thought my troubles were over. The mining company seemed to have lost interest in my property, and the psychological pressure campaign ended. I was finally able to sleep through the night without hearing voices or seeing figures in the forest. But peace came with a price I hadn't anticipated. The guardian dolls had developed a taste for protection that went beyond the original compact. They began targeting anyone who came near the property. Hikers, hunters, even the mailmen. I would find their belongings scattered in the forest, along with that terrible smell of sulfur. At first, I tried to justify it. These people were trespassing after all. The dolls were just doing what they were designed to do. But as the disappearances mounted, I realized I had unleashed something I couldn't control. The dolls no longer stayed in the cellar. They moved freely throughout the house, repositioning themselves in different rooms, always watching, always whispering their ancient chants. Their eyes, once simple buttons, had taken on a lifelike quality that made my skin crawl. Worse, I began seeing my sister among them. Ioana appeared in my house one evening, standing in the corner of my living room with the other dolls. But she wasn't quite right. Her skin had a waxy, artificial quality, and her eyes were the same button-like material as the other guardians. When she spoke, her voice had the same hollow quality as the whispers I'd been hearing for months. "Thank you for calling us home, brother," she said. "We can protect the land forever now." I tried to approach her to see if she was real, or just another manifestation of my deteriorating mental state, but she vanished the moment I got close. In her place was a new doll, one that looked exactly like her, down to the scar on her left hand from a childhood accident. That's when I understood the true horror of what I'd done. The guardian spirits didn't just protect the land, they collected souls to add to their ranks. Everyone who disappeared in the forest hadn't been killed. They'd been transformed, turned into eternal guardians bound to the property. And Ioana, in her fragile mental state, had been the first to volunteer. I tried to reverse the ritual, to break the compact my ancestor had made, but every attempt only made things worse. The dolls multiplied, appearing in every room of the house. I could hear dozens of voices whispering now, all the souls that had been claimed over the years. The mining company sent one final representative, a young woman who seemed genuinely concerned about the missing men. She brought police with her this time, officers from Bucharest who couldn't be bought off like the local authorities. I wanted to warn her, to tell her to leave immediately, but the dolls wouldn't let me speak. They had taken control of my voice, using it to invite the investigators inside, to offer them coffee and pretend everything was normal. The woman introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Mueller, a forensic psychologist brought in to assess my mental state. She explained that the mining company was concerned I might be suffering from isolation-induced psychosis, that the stress of fighting their legal challenges had caused a complete psychological break. "Mr. Popescu," she said in heavily accented English, "we know you've been under tremendous pressure. We want to help you, but you need to trust us." As she spoke, I could see the dolls positioning themselves around the room, preparing for another feeding. Their button eyes reflected the lamplight like tiny stars, and their stitched mouths seemed to be smiling in anticipation. I tried to warn her, tried to tell her to run, but my voice wouldn't obey. Instead, I heard myself agreeing to cooperate, inviting her and the officers to stay for dinner, suggesting they make camp on the property to conduct a thorough investigation. The placebo effect works both ways. Just as believing in something can make it real, disbelief can make you vulnerable to things you don't understand. Dr. Mueller approached my case with scientific skepticism, convinced that everything could be explained by psychology and stress-induced hallucinations. She never saw the dolls moving in her peripheral vision. She never heard the whispers that grew louder as night fell. She never noticed how the temperature dropped whenever she got too close to the truth. But the officers felt it. I could see the fear growing in their eyes as darkness settled over the valley. They kept checking their phones, realizing they had no signal, no way to call for backup. One of them suggested they leave immediately, but Dr. Mueller insisted on staying to complete her evaluation. That was her fatal mistake. The screaming started again around midnight, but this time it was coming from inside the house. Dr. Mueller's professional composure cracked as she watched the dolls move with obvious intent, their crude limbs jerking to life as they surrounded her chair. "This isn't possible," she kept repeating. "Mass hallucination. Shared psychotic episode. This isn't real." But the dolls didn't care about her scientific explanations. They had work to do. I found 3 new dolls in my living room the next morning, 2 dressed in police uniforms, 1 in a business suit. They sat quietly with the others, their button eyes reflecting the dawn light streaming through my windows. The missing persons reports started coming in by afternoon. 3 investigators from Bucharest had vanished while researching the disappearances of my property. Search teams were being organized. Media attention was growing. I knew it was only a matter of time before they came in force. Police, military, maybe even international authorities. The guardian spirits had protected the land for over a century, but they'd never faced this level of scrutiny. That's when I made my final decision. I gathered all the dolls, dozens of them now, representing every soul that had been claimed, and carried them down to the cellar. Using my grandmother's journal as guidance, I prepared one last ritual, the most dangerous one of all, the release. According to Anna's notes, the blood compact could be dissolved, but only if the current landowner willingly joined the guardian spirits, adding his own soul to their ranks. The property would become truly cursed then, uninhabitable by the living, protected by an army of the dead. I pricked my finger one last time, letting my blood fall onto the ancient deed written in red ink. The paper began to smoke and curl, and I could feel something fundamental changing in the air around me. The dolls began to sing, a haunting melody in old Romanian that seemed to resonate in my bones. One by one they stood up and approached me, their button eyes now glowing with an inner light. As they touched me, I felt pieces of myself being pulled away, transformed, woven into the fabric of their eternal guardianship. My reflection in the cellar's old mirror showed my skin taking on that same waxy quality I'd seen in Ioana's face. But I wasn't afraid anymore. For the first time in months, I felt peaceful. The search teams found my house empty 2 days later. My body was never recovered, but they discovered something in the cellar that made national news. Hundreds of handmade dolls, arranged in perfect circles, all with human hair and fingernails incorporated into their construction. The forensic analysis was inconclusive. Some experts claimed the materials were centuries old, others insisted they were recent. The case file disappeared from official records within a month, and the property was quietly seized by the Romanian government and declared a protected wilderness area. No one lives there now. No one dares. But sometimes on foggy nights when the mist rolls down from the Carpathian peaks, hikers report seeing lights in the abandoned valley. They hear singing carried on the wind, dozens of voices harmonizing in an ancient language that predates written history. The mining company withdrew their claim and has never spoken publicly about what happened to their investigators. The German government considers the case closed, though families of the missing men still demand answers that will never come. I'm still there, in that valley, part of something larger and older than individual consciousness. We guard the land as we always have, as we always will. The dead make the most faithful guardians because we have nothing left to lose. And if you ever find yourself driving through the Carpathian Mountains of Romania, if you see a mist-shrouded valley with no trespassing signs in multiple languages, please heed the warning. Some properties are protected by forces that lawyers and governments can't touch. Some compacts are written in blood for good reason. We're always watching, always waiting, always ready to welcome new guardians to our eternal ranks. The land remembers everything, and it never forgives. Cartoon curse. Disclaimer. This horror story is a work of fiction inspired by real-life themes. All characters and events are fictionalized. I've always been fascinated by the strange ways the world seems to whisper its secrets, hidden in plain sight. My name is Alex, and I'm a librarian, spending my days surrounded by dusty books and quiet corners, but my nights chasing mysteries that refuse to stay buried. I've always believed stories have power. Some comfort, some haunt, and some seem to know more than they should. A year ago, I stumbled across something that shook me to my core. A story that clings to me like a shadow I can't shake. It started with a late-night scroll through social media. A viral post about an old cartoon predicting real-world events with chilling accuracy. At first, I laughed it off. Coincidence, right? But the deeper I dug, the more I felt it. A creeping dread. Like the cartoon wasn't just predicting the future, but pulling me into it. I need to tell you about Thomas Reed, a man whose obsession with that show cost him everything. I met him in the library, and what he showed me changed how I see reality. This story isn't just about fear. It's about the terror of knowing something you can't unlearn. So settle in, dim the lights, and listen. This is my story, but it's also his. It was a quiet evening in the library. The kind where the hum of fluorescent lights feels louder than it should. I was sorting returns, the smell of old paper and dust filling the air, when Thomas Reed walked in. He was a regular, a wiry man in his late 30s, with tired eyes and a nervous energy that made the air around him buzz. He always came in late, requesting obscure books on conspiracy theories, urban legends, or anything about predictive media. That night he looked different. Pale, jumpy, like he hadn't slept in days. He slid a USB drive across the counter and whispered, "You need to see this." His voice cracked, and his hands shook. I should have said no, but something in his eyes, desperation, fear, hooked me. I took the drive home, and that's when my world started to unravel. Back in my apartment, I plugged the USB into my laptop. It was a collection of video files, clips from an old cartoon called The Family. You've probably heard of it. A show famous for its eerie predictions, disasters, elections, even technological leaps. All depicted years before they happened. Thomas had compiled a montage of episodes, each paired with news articles showing real-world events that mirrored them. A 1997 episode showed a city skyline with a magazine cover that eerily resembled the date of the infamous tragedy. A 1993 episode depicted a flu outbreak from an overseas package, its symptoms chillingly close to a global pandemic. There were clips about political figures, voting machine glitches, even a submarine disaster, all aired years before the events. My skin prickled as I watched, a knot forming in my stomach. It wasn't just coincidence. It was too precise, too deliberate. I felt like I was staring at something forbidden, something that wasn't meant to be seen. I couldn't stop thinking about Thomas. His fear was contagious, seeping into me like damp rot. Why had he given me this? What did he want me to do? I went back to the library the next day, hoping to find him, but he didn't show. Instead, I found a note slipped into a book he'd returned. It's not just a show. It's watching us. Look for the tape. My heart raced. What tape? I felt a pull, like the library itself was urging me to dig deeper. That night I searched the archives, my hands trembling as I sifted through old VHS tapes in the basement storage. Buried under a pile of forgotten donations, I found it. An unmarked cassette labeled The Family. Unaired episode. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me. I took it home, my pulse thudding in my ears. I didn't have a VCR, so I borrowed one from a colleague, setting it up in my dimly lit living room. The tape was old, the plastic case scratched and warped. When I pressed play, static filled the screen, followed by the familiar The Family theme song, but distorted, like it was being played underwater. The episode was strange, darker than the show's usual humor. It followed the family's youngest daughter, Lily, as she found a strange object in their attic. A small wooden music box with a carved eye on its lid. When she opened it, a haunting melody played, and the screen flickered, showing glimpses of things that didn't belong. News headlines from the future, faces of people I recognized from real life, events that hadn't happened yet. My chest tightened. The characters seemed to know they were being watched, their eyes occasionally darting to the screen, like they could see me. The episode ended with Lily hiding the music box in the library. My library. The final frame showed her writing a note. Don't trust the show. My hands went cold. I replayed the tape, pausing on every frame, my mind racing. Was this real? Had Thomas seen this? The note he'd left mentioned a tape, and now I was holding it, feeling its weight like a curse. I started seeing the music box in my dreams, its carved eye staring, the melody looping in my head. I'd wake up sweating, my heart pounding, convinced I'd heard it playing in my apartment. I told myself it was just my imagination, but the fear was real, gnawing at me like a parasite. I dug into Thomas's life, piecing together fragments from library records and online searches. He'd been a professor once, specializing in media studies, but he'd lost his job after publishing wild theories about the family controlling reality. His family, estranged siblings, a distant mother, had cut him off, calling him delusional. He'd written about the show obsessively, claiming it wasn't just predictive but causative, that it planted ideas in the world, shaping events. His posts were frantic, laced with paranoia, but they echoed the dread I felt watching that tape. I found myself questioning everything. My memories, my reality. Was I drawn to the library because of Thomas? Or was something else pulling me in? I went back to the library's basement, searching for more clues. The air was thick with dust, the shelves looming like silent sentinels. In a forgotten corner, I found it. The music box from the episode, its carved eye glinting under my flashlight. My breath caught. It was real. Solid. Cold to the touch. I opened it, and the melody played, soft, hypnotic, curling around my thoughts. The library seemed to shift, the walls humming faintly, like they were alive. I slammed the box shut, my hands shaking, but the melody lingered in my mind, inescapable. I couldn't stop. The music box became an obsession, just like the show had been for Thomas. I brought it home, hiding it under my bed. But I could hear it at night, the melody seeping through the floorboards. I started seeing things, shadows moving in my peripheral vision, faces in the library's windows that vanished when I looked. I'd catch myself humming the melody, my thoughts foggy, like I was losing pieces of myself. I tried to find Thomas, but he'd vanished. No address, no phone, no trace. His absence felt like a warning, but I was too deep to turn back. The tape was worse. I watched it again and again, each time noticing new details. A character whispering my name, a background sign with my apartment's address. The show felt alive, like it was rewriting itself to include me. My dreams grew vivid, blending with reality. In one, I was Lily, standing in the library, the music box in my hands as the walls closed in. In another, I was Thomas, running from something I couldn't see, the melody chasing me. I'd wake up gasping, my room feeling smaller, the air heavier. I started doubting my own mind. Was I imagining this, or was the show gaslighting me, blurring the line between fiction and reality? I found more of Thomas's notes, hidden in books he'd checked out. They were frantic, scrawled in margins. The music box is a key. It sees you. It knows. He wrote about a curse tied to the show, something ancient, woven into its creation. He believed the writers had stumbled onto a ritual, black magic maybe, or something older, that let the show see the future, maybe even shape it. He mentioned a source, an entity behind the predictions, something that lived in the music box. His last note was a plea. Destroy it before it takes you too. I tried to destroy the box, smashing it with a hammer, but it wouldn't break. The wood was unyielding, the carved eye untouched. Instead, the melody grew louder, filling my apartment, my head. I started hearing voices, not just the melody, but whispers, urging me to watch the tape again. I resisted, but the pull was too strong. One night I gave in, and the episode was different. The characters were talking to me, their faces distorted, their voices accusing. "You shouldn't have looked, Alex," Lily said, her eyes black pits. The screen flickered, showing my own face, my own apartment, like the show was filming me in real time. I yanked the plug, but the TV stayed on, the melody blaring. I was unraveling. I stopped going to work, too afraid to face the library. I barely slept, my mind a tangle of fear and doubt. I'd see Thomas in my dreams, his face gaunt, his voice warning me to run. But where could I go? The music box was always there, even when I hid it. In my closet, under the sink. It would reappear on my nightstand, its eye watching. I started writing notes, like Thomas, trying to make sense of it. But my words felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else. I'd find myself writing "Alex will stay" over and over, my hand moving on its own. The first twist came when I found a new tape in my mailbox. No label, no sender. It was another family episode, but this one was set in my apartment. The characters were reenacting my life, my job, my routines, my fears. Lily held the music box, singing my name while the family laughed. Their voices worked. The final scene showed me watching the tape. My own face frozen in terror as the screen went black. I dropped the tape, my heart pounding. How was this possible? Had the show always known me? Or was it creating me, writing me into its story? The second twist was worse. I found Thomas, or what was left of him. I had gone back to the library, desperate for answers, and found a hidden room behind a bookshelf. Inside was a shrine, candles, drawings of the music box, and a photo of Thomas, his eyes scratched out. Next to it was a journal, his handwriting barely legible. The last entry read, "I'm not Thomas anymore. I'm part of it." I realized he hadn't disappeared. He'd been consumed. His identity erased by whatever lived in the show. And now it wanted me. The room felt alive, the walls pulsing with the melody. I ran, but the music box was in my bag when I got home, though I hadn't brought it. The show was everywhere now. My TV turned on by itself, playing clips of the family that didn't exist. Scenes of me as a child. Moments I'd never shared. Secrets only I knew. The characters spoke in my voice. Their eyes locked on me. I tried to unplug everything, but the melody followed. Humming from the walls, the floor, my own head. I saw myself in mirrors, but my face was wrong. Sometimes Thomas's, sometimes Lily's, sometimes no one's. My thoughts weren't mine anymore. They were the show's, rewriting me, pulling me into its world. I don't know how I'm still here. One moment, I was in my apartment. The music box melody drowning my thoughts, the TV showing my own face screaming. The next, I was outside, lying in the street, the night air cold against my skin. The library loomed in the distance, silent, its windows dark. The music box was gone. The tapes, too, like they'd never existed. I told the police, but they found nothing. No shrine, no journal, no trace of Thomas. They said I was stressed, maybe delusional. Maybe they're right. But I hear the melody sometimes. Faint. Like a memory I can't shake. I see the family in my dreams. Their faces shifting. Their voices calling my name. I check my TV, expecting it to flicker on. But it stays dark. I don't know if the show was cursed, or if I was, or if I'm still part of its story. I moved away, left the library, but the fear follows me. Something's out there, something that knows me, and I'm terrified it's still writing about my future. Lighthouse Murmur. My name is Ethan, and I took a job as a lighthouse keeper off the coast of Maine, on a jagged rock called Widow's Point. The lighthouse is old, built in 1832, and it sits alone, surrounded by nothing but churning waves and screaming gulls. I'd been out of work for months, laid off from my warehouse job, and the posting for a seasonal keeper seemed like a lifeline. 6 months of solitude tending the light with nothing but the ocean and my thoughts. I thought it'd be peaceful, a chance to clear my head after a messy breakup and too many nights drinking alone. But Widow's Point had other plans for me, and now I'm not sure I'll ever leave. The journey to the lighthouse was rough, the supply boat bucking against waves that seemed angry, like they didn't want me there. When I stepped onto the rocky shore, the air was sharp with salt, and something else, something sour, like rotting seaweed left too long in the sun. The lighthouse towered above, its weathered stone streaked with moss, the beacon at the top dark and silent under a sky bruised with clouds. The keeper I was replacing, a grizzled man named Tom, barely looked at me as he handed over the keys. "Don't touch the old logbooks," he muttered, his eyes darting to the tower. "And don't listen too close at night." Before I could ask what he meant, he was gone, the boat disappearing into the fog. The first few days were quiet, almost boring. My job was simple: keep the light running, log the weather, and radio the mainland if anything broke. The lighthouse was automated, so most of my time was spent cleaning, checking the generator, or reading paperbacks left behind by past keepers. But even in those early days, something felt off. The air inside was heavy, like it was pressing down on me, and the walls creaked constantly, not just from the wind but in a rhythm, like a heartbeat. At night, the ocean's roar seemed to carry whispers, faint and garbled, like voices just out of reach. I told myself it was the isolation, my mind playing tricks. I'd read about how solitude can mess with you. Schizophrenia runs in my family, and my cousin used to hear things that weren't there. Was that happening to me? By the end of the first week, the whispers grew clearer. They weren't coming from the ocean, but from inside the lighthouse, seeping from the stone walls, the rusted spiral staircase, even the cracked mirror in my bunk room. I'd lie awake, the words forming just at the edge of understanding. "You shouldn't have come." I checked every inch of the place, thinking maybe a radio was left on or pipes were rattling, but found nothing. The generator hummed steadily. The radio was silent, and the only other sound was the wind howling outside. Still, the whispers persisted, growing louder when I climbed the tower to check the light. One night, I found the old logbooks Tom had warned me about, stacked in a dusty corner of the keeper's quarters. They were leather-bound, their pages yellowed and brittle, some dating back to the lighthouse's first years. Curiosity got the better of me, and I started reading. Most entries were mundane, weather reports, ship sightings, but a few stood out. In 1876, a keeper named Amos wrote about murmurs in the stone, voices that kept him awake, warning him not to touch something called the lens. In 1923, another keeper, Eliza, described a shadow that followed her up the stairs, always just out of sight. The final entry from 1998 was scrawled in shaky handwriting. "It knows I touched it. I'm sorry." The page was stained with something dark, like blood. I slammed the book shut, my heart racing. What was the lens? The beacon's Fresnel lens was just glass and metal, nothing special. But the next time I climbed the tower, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me. The lens gleamed under the moonlight, its prisms catching the light in a way that felt alive, like an eye staring back. I avoided touching it, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent. "You broke the rules." The second week, things got worse. The radio started picking up static, even when it was off. I'd hear snippets of voices, not the Coast Guard or fishermen, but something else, speaking in a language I didn't understand, all guttural and sharp. The lights flickered constantly, casting shadows that moved when they shouldn't. One night, I woke to find my bunk room door open, the staircase beyond lit by a faint greenish glow. I grabbed my flashlight and followed it, my bare feet cold on the iron steps. The glow came from the lens room, pulsing like a heartbeat. When I reached the top, the lens was spinning on its own, the light sweeping across the ocean in a frantic, uneven rhythm. I swear I saw faces in the glass, distorted, eyeless, their mouths open in silent screams. I ran back to my bunk, locked the door, and didn't sleep. The next morning, I found scratches on the outside of the door, deep and jagged, like claws had raked across it. I radioed the mainland, begging for an early pickup, but the Coast Guard said a storm was coming. No boats for at least a week. I was trapped. Desperate for answers, I dug deeper into the logbooks. One entry, from 1854, mentioned a local legend about Widow's Point Didoy. The island was sacred to the Wabanaki people, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. A shaman had cursed the land after settlers built the lighthouse, claiming it disturbed a spirit called the Watcher, a thing that fed on guilt and secrets. The curse was tied to the lens, crafted from glass blessed, or cursed, by the shaman himself. Touching it, the legend said, would wake the watcher, and it would claim you unless you appeased it with an offering. What kind of offering? The logbook didn't say. I hadn't touched the lens, had I? I couldn't remember. My first day, I'd inspected the beacon, run my hands over the metal casing, maybe brushed the glass. Had that been enough? My mind spiraled, doubts creeping in. I'd done bad things in my life. Lied, cheated, hurt people I loved. Was the watcher feeding on that? The whispers seemed to know my secrets, hissing about my ex, my fights with my dad, the time I stole money from a friend. Each night they grew personal, cutting deeper. You can't hide what you are. By the third week, the lighthouse felt alive, its walls breathing, its shadows crawling. I stopped sleeping, my eyes bloodshot, my skin clammy. I saw things, figures in the corners, tall and thin, their limbs bending wrong. They'd vanish when I turned, but I could feel them watching, waiting. The lens room became the worst place. The light would flicker, and I'd see my reflection in the glass, but it wasn't me. My face was wrong, pale, hollow, with eyes that glowed like the greenish light I'd seen before. I started avoiding the tower, but the whispers followed, echoing in my skull. One night I found something new in the keeper's quarters, a small wooden box hidden under a loose floorboard. It was carved with symbols, like the ones in the logbooks, and it hummed when I touched it, a low vibration that made my teeth ache. Inside was a shard of glass, sharp and cold, wrapped in a cloth stained with something dark. The whispers screamed when I opened it, a chorus of voices. You touched it. You're ours. I dropped the box, the glass shattering on the floor. The air grew thick, the temperature plummeting, and I swear I saw frost forming on the walls. I ran outside, the wind howling, the waves crashing like they wanted to swallow the island whole. But the figures were there too, standing on the rocks, their shapes barely human, their eyes glowing in the dark. I stumbled back inside, barricading the door, but the whispers were everywhere now, not just in my ears but in my thoughts, my blood. They told me things, horrible things about the keepers who'd come before, how they'd gone mad, how they'd thrown themselves into the sea to escape the watcher. One logbook mentioned a keeper who tried to burn the lighthouse down, only for the flames to turn on him, leaving nothing but ash. I tried to fight it to stay sane. I wrote in the logbook, documenting everything, hoping it'd keep me grounded. But my handwriting started changing, the words twisting into symbols I didn't recognize. My reflection in the mirror wasn't mine anymore. It was one of them, mimicking my movements, smiling when I screamed. I started hearing my own voice in the whispers, accusing me, mocking me. Was this schizophrenia? Cognitive dissonance? Or was the watcher real, peeling away my sanity layer by layer? Last night I found a final logbook entry, scratched into the back cover. The watcher demands a price. Give it what it wants, or it takes everything. I don't know what it wants. My guilt? My life? I've tried praying, leaving offerings, food, my watch, even a lock of my hair at the base of the lens. Nothing works. The figures are closer now, standing just outside my bunkroom door. I can hear their nails scraping the wood, their voices blending with the whispers. You can't run. You belong to us. I'm writing this now, my hands shaking, the lighthouse trembling like it's alive. The storm's here, and the radio's dead. No one's coming. The lens is spinning again, its light sweeping across the room, and I can see them in the glass. Hundreds of faces, keepers, sailors, lost souls, all trapped inside. My reflection is there too, but it's not me anymore. It's smiling, and I'm not. If you're hearing this, if you're out there on some lonely job, in a place that feels wrong, listen to me. Don't touch what doesn't belong to you. Don't disturb what's been left alone. The universe has rules, and if you break them, it'll come for you, 100 times over, in ways you can't imagine. I can hear the watcher now, its voice in my head, my heart, my soul. The door is creaking, the shadows are moving. I don't think I'll make it through the night. Be careful. The universe doesn't forgive.
Whispering signal. My name is Sophie, and I work the night shift at a 24/7 radio station in Bristol, England. The station, WBIX 99.9, is a relic tucked away in a crumbling brick building on the edge of the city, its antenna looming over the rooftops like a skeletal finger. It's a small operation, mostly playing pre-recorded shows and old hits to keep the drunks and insomniacs company. I took the job to pay for my art degree thinking it'd be easy, monitor the broadcast answering the occasional call, and keep the coffee pot full. But something about this place, this city, this frequency, has me trapped in a nightmare I can't wake from. It started on a rainy Monday, around 3 a.m. The studio was quiet, just the hum of the equipment and the pattern of rain against the windows. I was alone, sipping tea, scrolling through my phone to stay awake. The overnight show was automated, a loop of indie rock and weather updates, so I had little to do but watch the soundboard's lights flicker. That's when I heard it, a faint crackle, like static, but with a rhythm, almost like breathing. It wasn't coming from the speakers or my headset. It was in the air, all around me, seeping from the walls. I checked the equipment, thinking a wire was loose or the transmitter was acting up. Everything looked fine. The static faded, replaced by a heavy silence that made my ears ring. I told myself it was just the old building, the kind of place that creaks and groans like it's alive. Bristol's full of history, old pubs, haunted churches, stories of curses and ghosts. My nan used to tell me about the gray lady who haunted the docks, a spirit tied to a shipwreck, whispering to sailors who strayed too close. I laughed it off then, but that night the stories didn't seem so funny. The next night the static came back, louder, with whispers buried in it. I couldn't make out words, but they had a cadence, like a chant in a language I didn't know. I checked the broadcast logs. Nothing unusual, just the usual playlist. But when I put on my headset, the whispers were clearer, hissing through the signal. You shouldn't have listened. My heart skipped. I yanked the headset off, my hands shaking, but the voice kept going, echoing in the studio. I turned off the soundboard, unplugged the mic, but it didn't stop. It was everywhere, crawling under my skin. I called my boss, Martin, but he didn't answer. I texted my mate Ellie, who'd worked the day shift, but she just said I was tired, maybe hearing things from too many late nights. But I wasn't imagining it. My mom had struggled with borderline disorder, hearing voices that weren't there, and I'd always feared it might hit me too. Was this what it felt like? My mind breaking, conjuring horrors from the static? I pushed the thought away, but it clung like damp fog. By the third night, the studio felt wrong. The lights flickered, casting shadows that moved when they shouldn't. The monitors showed static, not the usual waveform display, and the static wasn't just noise. It formed shapes, like faces, twisting and fading. I heard footsteps behind me, soft but deliberate, but when I turned, the studio was empty. Just the mixing desk, the mic, and the old vinyl records lining the walls. But the air was heavy, like it was pressing down on me, and the whispers grew personal. You let me in. I found an old logbook in a drawer, its pages yellowed, some dating back to the station's start in the 1950s. Most entries were boring, tech issues, playlist notes, but one caught my eye, from 1973. A DJ named Clara wrote about a signal that shouldn't be, a frequency that carried voices no one could trace. She heard them too, whispers that knew her secrets, her fears. Her last entry was scrawled, frantic. It's in the antenna. Don't touch it. The page was stained like someone had spilled coffee or blood. I hadn't touched the antenna, had I? It was on the roof, a rusted tower I'd never climbed. But the word stuck with me. I started researching Bristol's folklore online, finding stories about a cursed frequency 99.9 tied to a witch who lived near the docks in the 1600s. She'd been burned for necromancy, accused of summoning spirits through a wooden box that hummed with strange energy. The box was destroyed, but the land where the station now stands was said to be cursed, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. The whispers, the stories said, were the witch's voice, latching onto anyone who tuned in too long. The fourth night, the whispers turned into screams. I was adjusting the soundboard when the monitors went black, then lit up with an image of the studio, but not as it was. The room looked older, the equipment outdated, and there was a figure in the corner, tall and thin, its face a blank void. It wasn't on the security camera. It was in the broadcast signal, like it was transmitting itself. I unplugged everything, but the image stayed, the figure moving closer, its head tilting like it was listening. I ran to the roof, thinking I could check the antenna, maybe break whatever was causing this. The rain was heavy, the wind howling, and the antenna loomed above. Its metal was groaning. I swear I saw it glow, a faint greenish pulse, and the whispers were deafening now, chanting my name, my mistakes, lying to Ellie about why I missed her birthday, stealing tips from the cafe job I had last year, ignoring my mom's calls when she needed me. The guilt hit like a wave, and I wondered if this was the nocebo effect, my mind making the curse real. But then I saw it, the figure from the monitor, standing at the base of the antenna, its blank face staring up at me. I stumbled back, slipping on the wet roof, and ran downstairs. In the studio, I found something new, a small wooden box, carved with symbols, sitting on the desk. It wasn't there before, and it hummed when I touched it, a low vibration that made my teeth ache. I opened it, and inside was a shard of glass, sharp and cold, glowing faintly. The whispers screamed, "You shouldn't have touched it." I dropped the box, the glass shattering, and the air turned freezing, frost creeping up the windows. I tried to leave, but the studio door wouldn't budge. The lights went out, plunging me into darkness, and the figure was there, inches from my face, its breath cold and sour. It whispered my name, my sins in my mom's voice, my Nan's, my own. I screamed, clawing at the door, but it was locked tight. The monitors flickered back on, showing my face, but it wasn't me. My eyes were black voids, my mouth a jagged slash, smiling. I don't know how I got out. I woke up in my car, parked outside the station, the sun rising over Bristol. The studio looked normal, the box gone, the monitors showing the usual waveform. I quit that day, moved to a new flat, got a job at a coffee shop. But the whispers follow me. I hear them in my headphones, my TV, my dreams. Last night I found another box on my bedside table, with the same symbols, the same glass shard inside. The figure's outside my window now, its blank face watching, waiting. I don't know if it's real, if it's the curse, or if my mind's breaking. Schizophrenia, paranoia, guilt eating me alive. All I know is it's here, and it won't let me go. If you're listening, working a late shift, or tuning into a strange signal, hear me. Don't touch what doesn't belong to you. Don't listen too long. The universe has rules, and if you break them, it'll come for you, 100 times over, in ways that'll haunt you forever. The whispers are louder now in my head, my soul. The veer's at my door, its shadow moving. I don't think I'll make it through the night. Be careful. The universe doesn't forgive.
Mystery House for Winchester. It was supposed to be a simple research trip, a chance for me, an aspiring writer, to gather material for my next horror novel. I had always been fascinated by haunted places, but nothing prepared me for what awaited me at the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, California. What started as curiosity soon spiraled into something far darker, an experience that would leave me questioning everything I thought I knew about reality. I first heard about the Winchester Mystery House during a late-night documentary binge. The host described it as one of the most bizarre and haunted homes in the world, built by Sarah Winchester, the widow of William Wirt Winchester, heir to the Winchester rifle fortune. According to legend, Sarah believed she was cursed by the spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles and constructed the house endlessly to appease them. Intrigued, I booked a tour, eager to see the infamous mansion for myself. As I approached the property on a foggy morning, the house loomed before me like a labyrinth of secrets waiting to be uncovered. Its Victorian architecture was both beautiful and unsettling, with chimneys jutting out at odd angles and windows placed high on walls where no one could possibly reach. It felt alive, as if it were watching me. The guided tour began innocently enough. Our guide led us through narrow hallways, pointing out peculiar features like staircases leading to nowhere and doors that opened onto blank walls. He recounted tales of Sarah's eccentricities, her refusal to stop construction, her belief in seances, and her conviction that the spirits demanded constant expansion. But there was one detail he mentioned that stuck with me more than the others. Some visitors claimed to hear phantom footsteps or feel icy drafts even on warm days. Others swore they saw shadowy figures darting through the halls. At the time, I dismissed these stories as mere folklore. After all, how much truth could there really be in ghostly legends? Still, something about the house lingered in my mind long after the tour ended. That night, unable to shake the feeling that I'd only scratched the surface, I decided to return under the cover of darkness. Armed with a flashlight and a notebook, I slipped past the gates, determined to uncover the truth behind the rumors. The moment I stepped inside, the atmosphere changed. The air grew colder, heavier, pressing down on me like a weight. My flashlight flickered erratically, casting jagged shadows across the ornate woodwork. Every sound seemed amplified, the creak of floorboards beneath my feet, the faint rustle of curtains swaying despite the absence of wind. As I wandered deeper into the house, I noticed things I hadn't seen during the daytime tour. Doors that had been locked earlier now stood slightly ajar, revealing dimly lit rooms filled with antique furniture draped in dusty sheets. In one room, I found a table set for dinner, though the plates were empty and the chairs overturned as if abandoned mid-meal. It was as though the house itself had rearranged itself while no one was looking. At first they were faint, almost imperceptible beneath the hum of my own breathing. But as I moved closer to a staircase, spiraling upward into darkness, the voices grew louder, overlapping in a cacophony of anguish and despair. They spoke in languages I didn't recognize, their tones pleading, angry, mournful. I froze, gripping the railing tightly as cold sweat trickled down my back. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound brave. There was no response, only silence. Then slowly, deliberately, a single word echoed through the space. "Leave." Summoning every ounce of courage I possessed, I climbed the stairs, following the source of the whispers. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the house itself resisted my intrusion. When I reached the top, I found myself in a long corridor lined with doors. One stood open, revealing a room bathed in pale moonlight streaming through a cracked window. Sarah Winchester, or at least someone who looked like her, sat hunched over a desk, scribbling furiously in a leather-bound journal. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, streaked with gray, and her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. She didn't seem to notice me standing there, transfixed by the sight. Before I could move, the temperature plummeted. Frost crept along the walls, and the figure at the desk turned slowly toward me. Her expression was unreadable, neither hostile nor welcoming, yet it sent shivers racing down my spine. Without warning, she vanished, leaving behind only the faint scent of lavender and the echo of her pen scratching against paper. Panic surged through me as I bolted from the room, retracing my steps through the maze-like corridors. But the house had shifted again. Familiar landmarks were gone, replaced by endless hallways stretching impossibly far in every direction. Doors slammed shut on their own, trapping me in narrower and narrower spaces until I found myself cornered in a tiny alcove with no visible exit. That's when I saw them, the spirits. Dozens of shadowy figures emerged from the walls, their forms flickering like candle flames caught in a draft. Some wore tattered uniforms, others plain clothes, but all bore expressions of sorrow and rage. They surrounded me, closing in until I could feel their icy breath on my skin. Just as I thought I might scream, a loud crash echoed through the house, startling the apparitions into vanishing. Heart pounding wildly, I stumbled toward the noise, finding a shattered window overlooking the front yard. Summoning strength I didn't know I had, I crawled through the broken glass, cutting my hands in the process, and collapsed onto the damp grass outside. The cool night air hit me like a wave, grounding me in reality once more. When I finally made it home, I pored over historical records about the Winchester Mystery House, desperate to understand what I had witnessed. According to accounts, Sarah Winchester truly believed she was haunted by vengeful spirits and spent 38 years expanding the house in an effort to confuse and trap them. Whether her actions succeeded remains debatable, but one thing is certain: the house retains an aura of mystery and unease that defies explanation. Though I've since returned to writing, the memory of that night continues to haunt me. Sometimes when I sit alone at my desk, I swear I can still hear the faint scratching of a pen against paper. And whenever I pass by a mirror, I half expect to see a shadowy figure standing just over my shoulder. Because deep down I know one wrong decision, one careless moment, and everything can change in an instant.